Hi, this is Misha, and we've already done a comparison video of the Czech Vz.52 rifle versus the Soviet Russian SKS. These are both self-loading carbines. Then we did one on the Czech Vz.58 rifle compared with the Soviet Russian AK-3 and AKM. So it only seemed fitting to do a comparison of the pistols. Now, I brought out a little bit of eye candy here, but this main video is going to be comparing the Czech Vz.52 pistol, chambered in 7.62 Tokarev, with the Russian TT33 pistol, also of course chambered for 7.62 Tokarev, and the reason the cartridge has its name. People often call the Vz.52 a Tokarev. It's not even a variant. And on the commercial market, you'll often see these marked as CZ.52s because of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. This is technically not true as well. VZ stands for Vzor, which is model. This was actually not designed by what we know today as CZ and Bruno. It was actually first created at Strakanus. It was designed in the late 40s by the Jaroslav brothers. But we have a video on the history, so that's not really what this is about. Also, just to have some other things on the table, we have my Polish Tokarev. This is made at Factory 11, Radom. And we have another Czech gun. This is the VZ, the Vz.50, 1950. And this is actually chambered for 7.65 Browning, known as 32 Auto, or 7.65 by 17, whichever you like. Oh, and just for completeness' sake, this is a post-war Russian Tokarev, made at Izhevsk. Notice it has the slim slide serrations, which is a change they went to because they had new machining and it was faster and easier and gave, I guess, the look they wanted. And it's a return to the black Bakelite grips. They went to wood in World War II. Whereas this Radom version has the wartime, the original large, small serration interchange, and it has Polish grips which aren't marked. This one had a safety here. I removed it. I need to plug it with a rod, which I will do. And this one has an added safety back here, but interestingly, no import marks. But it is a matching gun. I do have one without a safety at all, but it's not as pretty as this one, so I brought out the prettier gun for you guys. So, how are these different? More likely, how are they the same? Much like with the first couple of guns we've compared, Czech versus Russian, the only thing they really share is the 7.62-25 bottleneck cartridge. Everything else is mechanically very different. After World War II, Czechoslovakia, which had been occupied by Nazi Germany, had a brief little thawing where they had some independence, but then the communists would take over. And they would build up their arms industry following World War II. One of their early guns that was actually produced in large numbers was this here. The Vz.50 is based heavily on the Walther PPK, but it is its own design. It mechanically, while it is a double single action, let me show you it's clear, guys. I know folks like to see that. We do have a slide hold back like on a PPK. We do not have a release, so you need to drop the mag. Double action. We do have a decocker here, 3 position, and if you notice the safety's on the frame, not the slide is on a Walther. Down here it acts as a safety. Up here you can fire. And again, if you have the hammer back and you push it down, safe, and then down further, and this is spring loaded, it'll spring back up for decock. So the trigger system's a little different. We have a wraparound grip, but it's a two-piece, unlike the PPK, which is a single piece. And takedown is very different. The PPK has a hinged trigger guard. This has a push button where you just pull the slide back and it comes off. But this is one of the most successful early communist era guns in the Czechoslovakian nation. So I thought we'd just bring it out. This is a pretty early one. If you own a Vz.70, you'll notice a lot of similarities. This is really the exact same gun, just an earlier version. The Vz.70 was the same gun with the facelift. So they did that. Now, the Russians wanted all their client states to adopt versions of their guns. They would have been happy if Czechoslovakia had just made Tokarevs, as Poland did, as Hungary did, as Romania did, and to some extent as Yugoslavia did, although they did their own thing with the M57. But Czechoslovakia was very independent-minded. This is why there was problems throughout the years with keeping communism in power over there. The Czechs were not very willing subjugates of Soviet Russia. For that alone, I give them props. They resisted communism more than most would have. One way they resisted was to have their own small arms development and industry. Around 1948, they began working on a 9mm pistol as the next full-size service sidearm to replace the P38, which was then standard in service because of all the leftover German guns. Communists took over. Russia mandated they use the standard Warsaw Pact 7.62 Tokarev cartridge, and so they hastily reworked their 9mm pistol to fire Tokarev, and that's where the Vz.52 comes from. The rework was done beginning in 1950, and this pistol was finalized, tested in 1952, and would go into production either at the end of that year or the beginning of the next. The first run would be at Strakonys and would be about 200,000 pistols. They would build these on and off through the 50s. And this would be standard issue in the Czech military. The smaller and lighter caliber Vz.50 would still be used by some officers and a lot of police. But this is just a straight blowback gun firing .32 Browning. So let's just move it out of the way. Move the Polish over here. Gonna move my Russian out of the way because I don't want to scratch it. This is a pretty nice example. So how do these two guns differ? Well, let's get to the dimensions. This gun is about, well, it's just under 2 pounds. It's little under 0.9 kilograms. Relatively, for a steel gun, not too bad. Pretty standard. This is similar, but it's heavier. It's just under a kilogram at about 0.95. Or it weighs just at 2 pounds. So it's a little heavier, a few ounces heavier. Lengthwise, this is about 8¼ inches tip to tip. This is about a ½ inch shorter. All told. I'm trying to hold it without scratching, guys. It's about 7 3/4 inches. And this is about 8 1/4 inches. So you would think this would have a longer barrel, but it really does not. This has about a 4.7 inch barrel, and the Tokarev has a 4.6. So negligible to no difference. The Tokarev is based on the Browning. We have a combination of features from the Browning 1903 and the Browning 1911. We have a single action only trigger. It's a straight pullback like on a 1911. The original military guns did not have a safety. All they had was a half cock notch here that locked things up. The safeties were added for import, and I would not mind leaving them on, except they're unreliable to the point of being dangerous. If you own a Tokarev with an added safety, please do not rely on it. You may hurt yourself or other people. Action-wise, this is a Browning style. The barrel cams down, and it has a link and a cross pin, as on a 1911. It also has a bushing in the front. I'm going to point this at you because you see it's completely unloaded. This bushing comes off to let the spring come out in the barrel. Whereas on a 1911, the slide release acts as the pin. It does here too, but it's held in by a detent in the back. On this, we have a much simpler clip. You just use a bullet tip, and this clip comes off. I think not a bullet tip, but a bullet rim. I put some bullets in my pocket. See if I can grab one that'll grab it here. I didn't bring the same bullets for this gun, so no one would worry. There we go. See, that just slides off there, like that. And we punch, I'll take the mag out, guys. Punch this out. Maybe, or it'll just spring back on me there. See? Just like on a 1911. I knew that was going to happen. I'll pick it up in a sec, don't worry. Now, interestingly, the trigger group is a piece in and of itself, including feed lips, which work in tandem with the magazine. The feed lips on these are not part of the magazine, they're actually part of the trigger group, which is really neat. It doesn't mean your mags can have bent feed lips. Now, you saw me shoot everything across because that's fun. Here's the buffer cap. Sometimes they'll do that, guys. Sometimes you can ease them out. Okay, there we go. Just a little stuck on there. Typical end cap. There we go. So you see, we have a link here, single link. Interestingly, the early TT30s, they did not machine these the full circumference of the barrel, but on later ones they did. It was just easier. And that's pretty much the operating system. Here's your spring. You see we have a short guide rod like on 1911. There's the end for that. Here's your frame. Not a whole lot to it once the trigger group's out. The grips are held on very interestingly. There's actually a kind of a cam lever inside that holds them on. We have an 8-round mag. The Polish mags have the little lanyard loop. Early Russians would too. Later they would go away from that in Russia. One fun fact about the Tokarev TT33, there's not a single screw in this whole gun. It is a masterpiece of simplicity for the 1930s, and also easy machining, resources. Just a very, very nicely designed gun for what it was. And it worked well. And if something broke, it was very easy for a unit armor to replace certain components, like, for example, that trigger pack. I mean, much of what could possibly go wrong, where did I set that, folks, is in this pack here. So if something went wrong, you just pick up another one from their armorer's kit, get it in the pistol. Might have to do some minor fitting. You can throw this in the spare parts bin, work on it later, see if it's the hammer, the spring, the feed lips, whatever. That's really about it. Also, of course, you have your spring here you might need to replace from time to time. But since the magazines did not have feed lips, these are very durable. You don't meet many Tokarev mags that don't work. So let's compare that to the Vz.52. The Czech gun. First off, you notice there's no slide release. There's a bolt hold open. As you can see, it's empty. Now, most of these, there is, in theory, a bolt hold open device right here, but a lot of them it's worn, so it's probably going to slam forward. Okay, this one it didn't. But a lot of the ones you buy, that'll be worn, and it'll just slam forward and remove the mag. Let's look at the mag while we pulled it out. It is also an 8-round mag, but a very different pattern. It does have feed lips. The Tokarev uses a Browning style push button release. This one uses a heel release in front of the lanyard loop, which rotates. This is also a single action only pistol. However, it uses a pivoting trigger, not a pullback Browning style. Safety wise, we have a manual safety reminiscent of the Vz.50, but it operates in reverse. Here is fire. Here is safe. We also have a decock feature. See? However, this is something they would find out later in military service. You cannot rely on that. So if you have a decocker that still works on yours, do not rely on it. There is a part in there that can fail. It did often in military service. So it can ignite the projectile, the casing, the primer. So if you use your decocker, use it downrange. Also, while we're just talking about this part of the gun, the firing pin is a known weak point. It's a very thin firing pin, and it can either bend, break, or just simply corrode. So you see a lot of replacement stainless steel. Just wanted to mention that way we were kind of looking at the back of the gun. The grips are a two-piece affair. They are held on with this clip here, so a little different than on a Tokarev. The grip itself is an interesting shape. On the Tokarev, we're very square. I'm find it here where I stuck her. It's a very vertical grip, very square panels, which you would think would be uncomfortable. But it's surprisingly not. Again, it's based off a Browning 1903 grip, so Browning for you, he was great at ergonomics. The VZ grip is much deeper, and it also has a trapezoidal shape. It's fat in the back and narrows at the front. It's long. To me, this is a very unnatural, uncomfortable grip because you have a sharp edge here which is digging into my finger. We wrap around here, so it looks like it should be more comfortable, but it's not because it's bigger and it's a heavier gun. Now sights, those are both 1950s style military sights. There's nothing to write home about. Ejection port, same. Finish, a lot of these in the beginning all had this baked on CZ finish, and as it would wear they would add it again. However, some would be blued in the 70s for more police or just civilian, private ownership. Tokarevs, on the other hand, would almost always be blued in Russia and client states, with wartime guns having a really light grayish blue that could be mistaken for park. So I would say the Czech finish is a little more durable, and it's definitely easier to refinish with. Put it in here. See? Takedown is very similar to the Vz.50. The catch is different, but the location's about the same. You just need to push this back a smidge, and this simply slides up and off, so that's easy. It definitely comes apart in the beginning much easier than the Tokarev. Here's our internals. This is all part of the frame, more traditional. We don't have a hammer pack. There's your ejector. Excuse me, your ejector. I had it right the first time. And you'll notice some interesting cutouts here. This is for the takedown. See this block here? We'll get to what that is in a minute. See, no feed lips. Pretty simple inside. Now, I'm not going to disassemble this slide, guys, because it's kind of a pain. Sorry. Here's your slide, though. We have a contained spring, barrel. Mechanically, this is a radically different system than the Tokarev. As I said, this design started off firing 9mm, and there are a lot of German influences in Czechoslovakia because of the occupation, and just, prior to it as well. The Tokarev is based on the tipping Browning barrel system. This uses a roller lock system. Sorta, not really, kinda like an MG42 or any of those others, but it's a radically different system that uses rollers to lock. This is why we have this post here. This is where your barrel mounts and how we lock back and forth. You can see cutouts here. That's why it's very different internally. It's a completely different locking system that's pretty unique to this pistol. So they did their own thing, much as they had done with the Vz.52 rifle and later the Vz.58. Now, in those cases, you can argue, I still think the SKS is superior to the Vz.52, but, they have pros and cons. The Vz.58, you can really argue it's better, or at least equal to the AK, so that Czechoslovakia doing its own thing worked in its favor in those cases. However, with this gun, no, it did not. Okay, got her back together. It's not hard to get back together, but it's a little bit of a difference than you would normally do. You start from the back and kind of push forward. So again, initial disassembly and reassembly is easy, but taking apart the slide is much more difficult. But as I was saying, there were parts, wear, and breakages at a much higher level than on our Tokarev or really any other military standard issue sidearm of the day. The chamber was thin, especially at the bottom, and this caused cracking, corrosion. The rollers would kind of become misshapen, pitted, come out of lock. And just general wear and tear, guys. I mean, the gun should be overbuilt. It looks heavy. It is heavy. It looks big. It is big. And the frame, the slide, look like they should be thick and beefy. They are, yet they still manage to crack because there's so many small cuts and small parts in these. In a word, this was over-engineered. And it was not originally engineered for 7.62 Tokarev, which is a long, hot round. It was engineered for 9mm Luger 9x19, which is a much shorter and, while plenty punchy round, not as high pressure as this. So it never fit well. In fact, it was so not doing well in the Czech military, but by the mid-50s they are already having to refurbish guns in military service. They even considered replacing it, but they did not have the finances. They had just set up the production line and they simply could not afford to replace it. So they were hardly thinking of replacing it in the 50s. What they ended up having to do was set up a very routine and frequent schedule of maintenance for these, where these would have to go into the armor for an inspection, and if they found issues, be sent back for an overhaul. Whereas a Tokarev might last 20 years between overhauls, these things are being looked at every 4 or 5 years. And again, we're having serious issues. Broken firing pins, broken decockers, huge safety issue there. Even cracked frames and barrels. When they worked fine, but they broke so easily. So anyone who ever thinks about the Beretta 92 controversy that happened with the U.S. military in the 80s, that had nothing on the Vz.52. And this would have never continued in service if it had not been for limited resources in Czechoslovakia. But they did keep these going, and it was mostly out of national pride. It is a powerful gun, I'll give it that. It's an interesting gun. And when these started to come in the late 90s, they were extremely cheap. Under $100 with holster, 2 mags, sometimes as low as $50. I bought this one in a store around $19.99 for $49.95. One reason I keep it is I have so little in it. They've gone up. They're about $300 now, I believe, maybe $350. Whereas Tokarev's coming in, especially military ones, not the Chinese, have always been a little more. $150 for the Romies, $200 at the beginning for the Polish. Both of those have gone up. Romies are about $250 now. Polish are about $400 to $500. Russians have always been rare, like this one. Even with added safeties, you're looking at minimum $6. Without the safety, more, lots more, even in pretty worn condition. So the Czech guns were affordable, and that's why they are so well known and popular in the US, really, not because they're especially great guns. But it was politically and culturally good for Czechoslovakia to do its own thing, and it would continue the trend with its submachine guns, light machine guns, and heavy machine guns. They would continue to do their own thing. This would actually remain in standard frontline service until 1982, when it was finally replaced by the Vz.52, which was a Makarov caliber gun. And for that, check out our Czech video on handguns. What I will say on this one, they learned their lesson with this. Looking at the Czech Vz.82, it is elegant, quite simple, and very dependable. So they, if nothing else, they really learned the value of those features in a handgun with the Vz.52. These would be pulled out of service throughout the 80s and surplused out in the 90s. There are very few left over in the Czech Republic today. Most of them have been sold to us or just scrapped. But yeah, I thought we would just do a comparison of the Vz.52 with the Russian Tokarev TT33. As you see, aside from the caliber, they really share nothing. Completely different operating systems, different magazines. They're both single action triggers, but a different style of trigger. This has no safety. This has a 3-way safety with decocker. Different finish, blued, painted, or blued later sometimes. So they're very different guns. They really are. But just thought we would share. Hope you enjoyed this video. These comparisons are actually pretty fun to make. If you have any questions or comments, want to share your own Tokarev or VZ stories, we really want them in the comments. We appreciate it. If you liked the video, please click like. If you haven't already subscribed and could do that, we'd really appreciate it as well. We are trying to grow the channel, and every little bit of support is very, very welcome. This is Misha, and we'll catch you next time.